My entitled mother demanded I hand over my house to her because my little sister is pregnant and needs it more than me. I know, it sounds like something from a bad daytime TV show. Trust me, living through it was 1,000 times more surreal. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. To really understand how we got to that point, you need some background. I'm Brenda, I'm 31 now. I have a younger sister, Felicity, who's 28. For as long as I've been alive, Felicity has been my mother's golden child. It was a fact of nature, like the sun rising in the east. If Felicity sneezed, my mother, Doris, would rush over with a blanket and hot soup. If I got a perfect report card, Doris would glance at it and say, "That's nice, dear," before asking Felicity about her day. Felicity was her doll, her mini-me, her second chance at a perfect life. I was just the other one. Our parents had a spectacularly messy divorce when I was a teenager. It wasn't a quiet parting of ways, it was a detonation that left craters in all our lives. My mother had reconnected with an old high school boyfriend on Facebook and started an affair. It was a cliché, but the pain it caused was real and sharp. My dad was a good man, a quiet man, and she broke his heart into a million pieces. My mother, Doris, is a difficult woman. That's the polite term. The clinical term might be narcissist. She's controlling, manipulative, and has a bottomless need for attention. Growing up, her primary method of communicating with me was by snapping her fingers. It wasn't just to get my attention, it was a command. Snap. Brenda, the dishwasher won't unload itself. Snap. Brenda, your sister needs help with her homework. It was a constant, demeaning reminder of my place in her hierarchy. Felicity, of course, would just watch, her expression unreadable, and never, not once, did she say, "Stop it, Mom." She was a silent co-conspirator. So, when the divorce finally happened, it was almost a relief. I didn't hesitate. I packed 2 suitcases and went to live with my dad full-time. I couldn't breathe in my mother's house anymore. Felicity, naturally, stayed with Doris. From that day forward, they formed a united front, a 2-person club from which my father was excluded. They'd only contact him when a bill was due or when Felicity needed something, a new laptop, a contribution for a school trip. It was always about money. My dad became my whole world. He was a businessman, the owner of a small but respected construction firm. He was smart, fair, and hardworking. And he saw something in me that my mother never did, potential. When I was 16, he started bringing me to the office on weekends. He taught me how to read blueprints, how to balance a budget, how to talk to subcontractors without getting ripped off. He'd say, "Brenda, you have a good head on your shoulders. You see the whole board, not just the next move." I started from the very bottom, making coffee and organizing invoices. I went to college for business management, working for him part-time. After I graduated, I came on full-time. I worked my tail off for 12 years, learning every single aspect of that business. One of the proudest days of my life was when he took me to lunch and slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents making me a full partner. Life felt stable, good. But stability is often an illusion. About 8 months ago, the foundation of my world crumbled. My dad had always been a heavy smoker, and despite my nagging, he loved his steak and whiskey. His lifestyle caught up with him, weakening his immune system. He was only 60 when he caught C-19. It was brutally fast. One Monday he was on a job site arguing about lumber prices, by the next Monday, he was gone. The funeral was a gut-wrenching, sterile affair conducted over a video call. It felt like a perversion of grief, watching pixels on a screen instead of holding someone's hand. He was cremated, his ashes to be buried in the local cemetery next to his parents, just as he'd requested. I saw Felicity on the screen, her face puffy and tear-streaked. She seemed genuinely devastated. But my mother. Doris sat there, perfectly composed, not a tear in her eye. She had an expression of mild boredom, as if she were waiting for a boring meeting to end. The coldness of it was terrifying. It wasn't grief, it was indifference. My father was a generous man, even to those who didn't deserve it. He'd paid every last cent of his court-ordered alimony and child support. He even set up a $30,000 college fund for Felicity. She burned through it in 2 years at a community college, majoring in partying, before dropping out with nothing to show for it. My mother isn't poor, not by a long shot. She has a stable job, owns her house outright, and makes a tidy side income renting out rooms on Airbnb. Her issue isn't a lack of money, it's an unquenchable greed. A few weeks after the funeral, we all met at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. My dad, ever the planner, had updated it just a year prior. I sat on a stiff leather chair, the air thick and silent. The lawyer, a kind man named Mr. Henderson who had known my dad for decades, cleared his throat and began to read. He announced a few small bequests to friends and distant family. Then he got to the main assets. He left Felicity his car, a reliable 5-year-old sedan, and $10,000 in cash. I saw Felicity's face fall. Then, he read my mother's name. Doris was to receive $1,000 and a set of antique dining chairs she'd always claimed were hers. I saw a flicker of pure fury in her eyes before her mask of indifference slipped back into place. Then, Mr. Henderson looked at me. He announced that my father had left me his entire stake in the company, making me the sole owner. He had also left me the entirety of his savings and investments. And finally, he had left me the house where he and I had built a life, the house filled with his memory. It was an incredible act of faith and love. But as I sat there, stunned and grieving, I could feel the temperature in the room drop by 20 degrees. I could feel my mother's and sister's eyes on me, cold and hard as diamonds. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a war. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. It was the only way to cope. Grieving felt like drowning, and the company was my life raft. There were so many loose ends, so many projects my dad had been in the middle of. I worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and the desperate need not to let him down. My boyfriend, Mark, was my anchor. He'd show up at the office at 9 p.m. with takeout, sit with me while I worked, and then guide me home when I was too exhausted to see straight. He moved into the house with me, and his presence made the empty rooms feel a little less cavernous. We started to build a life there, amidst the lingering scent of my dad's aftershave and the stacks of his favorite books. I heard very little from my mother and sister. The silence was a relief. Through the family grapevine, I learned that Felicity had dropped out of community college and was living with her boyfriend, Carlos. She had a part-time job designing graphics for some online company, but it was clear Carlos was paying most of the bills. Then came the big news: she was pregnant. It happened right after Carlos's job cut his hours, and he'd started pressuring her to find full-time work. She claimed it was a complete accident. I had a hard time believing that, but I kept my opinion to myself. The quiet lasted for about 2 months. Then, on a cold Tuesday evening, the peace was shattered. Mark and I were on the couch, recovering from a long day, watching some silly cooking competition. The house was warm and quiet. Then, a loud, insistent knock on the front door made us both jump. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Doris and Felicity on my porch. They were dressed up, Felicity in a new maternity dress, my mother in a sharp pantsuit. Felicity was beaming, a strange, excited energy coming off her. My mother had an air of smug purpose. Before I could even form a question, they swept past me into the foyer. There was no "Hi, Brenda," no "Can we come in?" Just a sense of absolute entitlement. I stood there by the open door, a cold gust of wind swirling around my ankles. Mark appeared in the living room archway, a confused look on his face. Brenda? Everything okay? I closed the door, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. It's my mother. And Felicity. Felicity was already in motion, flitting through the downstairs rooms like she was inspecting a property for sale. Oh, Mommy, look at the crown molding. Dad always had such good taste. She opened the coat closet, peered into the dining room. My mother, meanwhile, walked directly to my favorite armchair, my dad's old reading chair, and sat down as if it were her throne. She surveyed the room, her eyes lingering on the new photos of me and Mark I'd put on the mantel. Then, she looked directly at me and snapped her fingers. Snap. The sound echoed in the quiet house. A cold bottled water, Brenda. From the back of the fridge. The drive over was surprisingly taxing. I felt a familiar heat rise up my neck. I didn't move. I crossed my arms, a gesture that was part defiance, part self-preservation. What are you doing here? My voice was tight. Felicity chose that moment to reappear from the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Her face was glowing. Mommy, it's perfect, she squealed, clapping her hands together. The nursery could go in the second bedroom. It gets the morning sun. A cold, sickening dread began to pool in my stomach. I looked from my sister's ecstatic face to my mother's condescending smile. Perfect for what? My mother sighed, a long, theatrical sound of exasperation. Brenda, darling, don't be obtuse. It doesn't suit you. She patted the arm of the chair. I think it's time you did your sisterly duty. I just stared at her. Sisterly duty? What are you talking about? The words felt thick in my mouth. Mark had moved to stand beside me, a silent, supportive presence. He put a hand on my back, a small gesture that meant the world. Doris sighed dramatically, as if I were a particularly slow child. Brenda, don't be difficult. When your father passed, she said, the words clinical and cold, this house should have gone to me. I was his only spouse, after all. My jaw tightened. You were his ex-spouse. You haven't been his spouse for over 15 years, not since the divorce. She waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a fly. Details, details. The point is, a mistake was made in the inheritance. A grave error. But don't you worry, she continued, her smile widening, you can fix this now. It's quite simple, really. I felt like I was in a bizarre play. I could see Felicity peeking out from the hallway, her eyes wide with excitement. She was hanging on every word. Your sister, Doris went on, gesturing vaguely in Felicity's direction, needs this house so much more than you do. She's the one with a baby on the way. She needs stability. She needs a home to raise her child in. You have Mark. You have a good salary. You two can find a little apartment somewhere. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was talking about my life, my home, as if it were a minor inconvenience she could just rearrange to her liking. And since this should have been my house to begin with, she delivered the final blow, her voice ringing with triumph, I want to give it to her. I'm giving my home to my daughter in her time of need. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but the rage was a hot coil in my stomach. That, I said, my voice coming out louder and sharper than I intended, is not. King. Happening. Felicity flinched in the hallway. Mark's hand tightened on my back. You don't get to order me around anymore, Mother, I said, taking a step forward. And you especially don't get to do it in my own goddamn home. The smile vanished from Doris's face. Her eyes narrowed into slits. The mask of the charming matriarch fell away, revealing the tyrant beneath. And then, the snap. Snap. It was instinctive, a reflex of her rage. Stop, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I am your mother. And as far as you're concerned, I am your God. That means you listen to me, and you do as I say." She stood up, her body rigid with fury. "This house is rightfully mine, and your sister will live here. Do you understand me?" I just stood my ground, staring right back at her. "No." The word hung in the air between us. It was a word I'd rarely used with her growing up. It felt powerful. She took another step closer, her face contorted in a sneer. "This isn't a discussion, Brenda. Consider this your formal eviction." The words were absurd, insane, but she said them with such conviction. "And since I'm feeling gracious," she added, a cruel twist to her lips, "I'll give you 2 weeks to pack your bags and have your lawyer transfer the deed to me." For a moment, the sheer insanity of it all left me speechless. Eviction? From my own house? The house my father had worked his entire life for and left to me? Mark stepped forward slightly, ready to intervene, but I put a hand on his arm to stop him. This was my battle. My mother stood there, radiating a toxic sort of triumph, as if she had just won a major victory. Felicity had crept out of the hallway and was now standing behind her, looking like a vulture waiting for the kill. 2 weeks, Doris repeated, her voice firm. "Don't make me get unpleasant." I let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. "Unpleasant? You think this is pleasant?" I shook my head, the fog of shock finally clearing, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "You are trespassing. Both of you." I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone. My fingers felt steady as I unlocked the screen. Doris's eyes widened as she saw what I was doing. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "I'm doing what I should have done the second you barged in here," I said, my thumb hovering over the phone icon. "I'm calling the cops to have you removed from my property." That's when she lunged. She moved surprisingly fast for a woman her age, swiping at my hand like a cornered animal. Her nails scratched my wrist as she knocked the phone from my grasp. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. She immediately went to stomp on it, her heel raised to crush it. But I was quicker. I dove down and snatched it up before her foot came crashing down. I straightened up, phone clutched tightly in my hand, and started dialing 911. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Get out now, or I swear to God, these officers will drag you out." Suddenly, Felicity came barreling in between us, her arms held out wide like she was stopping a fight on a playground. Her face was a mask of theatrical distress. "Brenda, stop. Please. Can't you just do the right thing for once in your life? Can't you be a good big sister?" That's when I snapped. All the years of resentment, of being second best, of being the family servant while she was treated like a princess, it all came boiling to the surface. "Oh, really?" I spat, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm the bad sibling? Last I checked, Felicity, I was the one who's had to actually work for a living. I was the one doing all the chores while you sat on your ass being waited on hand and foot. You've had everything handed to you your entire life. You're a complete mooch who dropped out of college after blowing through Dad's money. So no, I don't owe you a damn thing. Now both of you, get out before I call the police." The truth, raw and unfiltered, hit her like a slap. Her face crumpled. Tears, real or fake I couldn't tell, started streaming down her cheeks. She turned to her mother, her voice a childish wail. "Mommy, make her stop." Doris immediately wrapped her arms around Felicity, hugging her and kissing her head while giving me a death glare that could have curdled milk. Then, a sly, wicked look came over her face. She thought she'd found her checkmate move. "You know," she said slowly, her voice a venomous purr, "if you do call the police, I can just tell them that you hit me." An old woman. And who knows, she glanced at Felicity's stomach, I could maybe say to everyone that you wanted to do a lot worse to a poor, pregnant girl in need. I don't think that would be a very good thing for you, or for the company's reputation. The threat hung in the air, vile and suffocating. She was willing to lie, to tell the police I had assaulted her, to destroy my reputation, all to get what she wanted. It was pure evil. Mark tensed beside me, his fists clenched. "Doris, that's enough," he said, his voice a low growl. But I held up a hand. I looked my mother dead in the eye. The fear she had always been able to instill in me was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like ice in my veins. "Just stop," I said, my voice eerily calm. I let her vile threat hang in the air for a second longer, letting her savor what she thought was her victory. "You seem to be forgetting something very important, Mother." She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "It's 2025, I said simply. "And I have cameras in this house." I gestured with my head towards the small, discreet security cameras mounted in the corners of the living room ceiling. "There's one there, and one there. They record both video and audio. Which means we have a lovely, high-definition recording of you openly admitting your plan to file a false police report. And of every other insane thing you've said since you forced your way in here." I let the words sink in. "I don't think," I added, mimicking her earlier tone, "that would be so good for you. If looks could kill, my mother would have vaporized me on the spot." I watched a kaleidoscope of emotions flash across her face, disbelief, then rage, then dawning horror, and finally, utter and complete deflation. The power she held over me, built on years of intimidation and manipulation, crumbled to dust in a single moment. She had no moves left. She was checked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in my life, I had left Doris speechless. Without another word, she grabbed my crying sister by the arm and started dragging her towards the door. It was a rough, angry motion, devoid of the motherly comfort she had been faking just moments before. But the drama wasn't over. Felicity, a 28-year-old woman, suddenly reverted to a toddler. She broke loose of our mother's grip and sat down hard on my porch steps, kicking and screaming. It was a full-blown tantrum. "You promised me," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. "You promised." I stood at the doorway with Mark, watching in stunned silence as my mother tried to physically haul my sister off my property. Felicity latched onto the porch handrails with a surprising grip, refusing to budge. Cars were slowing down on the street, their occupants staring at the bizarre spectacle unfolding on my lawn. It was humiliating. It was pathetic. And a tiny, vindictive part of me was enjoying every second of it. Finally, Doris managed to pry her fingers loose and drag her, still wailing, to their car. She shoved a blubbering Felicity into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and then turned to give me one last look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Go to hell, Brenda," she spat. Then she got in the car, tires squealing as she sped away, leaving me and Mark standing in the silence of my doorway, the sound of Felicity's sobs fading into the night. I wish I could say that was the end of it. For a few days, there was silence. A blessed, wonderful silence. I started to think, maybe, just maybe, they had finally gotten the message. Mark and I tried to return to normal. We had quiet dinners, we talked about work, we tried to erase the ugly scene that had played out in our living room. But I should have known better. Letting things go was never something my mother did. She didn't just get mad, she got even. The first sign of trouble came as a text message from my aunt, my dad's sister. "Brenda, what on earth is going on? Your mother is saying the most awful things." I had no idea what she was talking about. I called my aunt, and she sounded deeply concerned. She told me to check Facebook. The problem was, I couldn't. My mother and Felicity had both blocked me years ago. So my aunt started sending me screenshots. And my blood began to boil all over again. They had launched a full-scale smear campaign. My mother had written a long, rambling post, full of crocodile tears and righteous indignation. She painted me as a greedy, heartless bastard, her words, not mine, who had betrayed my own family. She claimed my father had always intended for the house to go to poor, pregnant Felicity, and that I had somehow taken advantage of his grief and failing health to manipulate him. The worst part was the lies she concocted about the will. She wrote that I had paid off the lawyer who handled Dad's will to forge the documents and steal the house right out from under her. Felicity had shared the post, adding her own tearful commentary about how her cruel older sister was leaving her and her unborn baby homeless. The posts were filled with comments from her friends and some distant relatives, all offering their sympathy and condemning me. "That's horrible. I can't believe Brenda would do that. Sending prayers to you and Felicity." It was a public execution, and I was the one on the chopping block. My hands were shaking as I read through it all. It was one thing to be screamed at in private, it was another to have my name dragged through the mud for everyone to see. They were trying to poison my entire world against me, to isolate me. I felt a surge of pure, cold rage. That was it. No more playing defense. I immediately saved all the screenshots. I called my lawyer, the very same one they were accusing of fraud, and forwarded him everything. He was, to put it mildly, furious. Defamation, libel, he started listing off the legal terms. He said he would draft a cease and desist letter immediately. The letter was delivered to my mother's house via courier the next day. And that afternoon, my phone rang. It was her. I let it ring a few times before answering, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "What have you done?" she shrieked. No hello, no preamble. "I believe the question is, what have you done?" I replied, my voice calm and even. "You got a lawyer involved? You're threatening your own mother? You accused me and a respected officer of the court of committing a felony," I stated flatly. "You lied. You tried to ruin my reputation. What did you expect me to do? Send you a thank you card?" I told her then, laying out my ultimatum. "You and Felicity will go back on Facebook. You will delete every single one of those posts. And you will write a new one, a public retraction, telling the absolute truth. That Dad's will was his and his alone, and that you lied out of anger and jealousy. If you don't," I took a breath, "I will send copies of these screenshots, along with the video recording from my security cameras, to every single person in our family. I'll send them to your boss. I'll post them online for the whole world to see. And then, on top of all that, I will sue you for everything you're worth." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You're being unreasonable," she finally sputtered. "I just did what I did for your sister's sake. She still needs that house more than you." "I don't care," I said bluntly. "Your time is up. Redact everything, or I will make sure your career is over." I could hear her breathing, heavy and ragged. The silence stretched on. Finally, I heard a sound like a deflating balloon. "Fine," she screamed, the word cracking with rage and defeat. "You win. Have it your way and keep the King house." Then she hung up. A few hours later, the posts were gone. In their place was a short, stilted message from my mother admitting the claims were made in a moment of grief and were untrue. It wasn't the groveling apology I wanted, but it was enough. The war, for now, seemed to be over. I found out later that Felicity and her boyfriend had to move in with our mother to save money. But Doris, in her infinite graciousness, put them in the damp, finished basement so she could keep her Airbnb rooms upstairs available. All I saw after that were Felicity's passive-aggressive online posts, complaining about her living situation. I had won, but it was a bitter, exhausting victory. For a couple of weeks, an uneasy truce settled over our fractured family. The only updates I got were through Felicity's vague, whiny social media posts. I was content to leave it that way. I was focusing on the company, on my relationship with Mark, on trying to build a life that was free from my mother's toxic orbit. But of course, the drama was only on a brief intermission. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was Felicity, and she sounded frantic. I could hear her sobbing on the other end. "Brenda? I need your help. It's Carlos. Carlos was her boyfriend, the father of her baby. I braced myself. What's wrong? He's questioning things, she choked out between sobs. He's questioning if the baby is his. He's threatening to leave me if I don't get a paternity test. I admit, a cynical part of me wasn't entirely surprised. Given Felicity's history of manipulation, I too believed there was a chance she could be lying. But hearing the raw panic in her voice, I felt an unexpected flicker of sympathy. He wants to leave me, Brenda, she wailed. Right before the baby comes. She swore up and down that she had always been faithful to him. Then get the test, I said simply. If you have nothing to hide, it will prove him wrong and put his mind at ease. We don't have the money, she whispered, her voice full of shame. Things have been so tight, and a test like that costs hundreds of dollars. I sighed. I didn't want to get dragged back into her messes. But the thought of a child being brought into this chaos, with a father who doubted his own baby, it didn't sit right with me. Fine, I said, making a quick decision. I'll pay for it. But this is a one-time thing, Felicity. Don't come to me asking for money or favors after this. She quickly, gratefully agreed. I arranged for the test online, even shelling out extra for expedited results. I hadn't actually met Carlos yet, so I suggested we all go out for a casual lunch. I knew how difficult it was to live with my mother, and I figured they both probably needed a break from that basement. When I met him at the restaurant, I understood a bit more. He was a quiet, polite man, clearly nervous and stressed out. He was also half Hispanic. And that's when a puzzle piece clicked into place in my mind. My mother, while never openly hateful, was a closet racist. She'd make subtle, cutting remarks, disguised as jokes, about anyone who wasn't white. I suddenly had a very bad feeling about where Carlos's doubts were coming from. I started to put two and two together, and I decided I needed to talk to him alone. A few days later, I invited him out for a beer, telling him I just wanted to get to know my future brother-in-law better. At first, he was hesitant, but at the pub, after one beer, he spilled his guts. He told me that ever since they'd moved in, my mother had been whispering in his ear. She'd tell him stories about how Felicity was just like her. How she had cheated before, so Felicity probably had those same tendencies. She'd plant seeds of doubt, little comments here and there, about how Felicity was secretive with her phone. It was a slow, methodical campaign of psychological warfare. His doubts grew every day, and he admitted he wasn't sure if Felicity had cheated or possibly even gotten pregnant on purpose so she wouldn't have to work anymore. Sadly, I knew he was probably right about the work thing. He said that Felicity was a completely different person when she was away from our mother, but ever since they'd been living in that basement, she had become more and more like a child, completely dependent on Doris for approval. After what I had witnessed at my own house, I wholeheartedly believed him. I asked if he'd suggested therapy, or moving out as soon as possible. He said he wanted to, but they didn't have the money, and he felt like he was walking on eggshells around both of them, terrified of starting a fight. And that's when some kind of sisterly, protective instinct I didn't know I still had kicked in. I realized that if I was going to have a niece or nephew, I couldn't let them be raised by my toxic, manipulative, racist mother. The cycle had to stop with me. I looked Carlos in the eye. Listen to me, I said. If those DNA results come back and that baby is yours, I'll offer you a job. A real job, with training and a good salary, at my company. I'll help you two get back on your feet and get the hell out of that house. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and overwhelming gratitude. For the first time that evening, I saw a glimmer of hope on his face. Now, all we could do was wait for the results. The day the DNA test results were due to arrive felt like an eternity. Since I don't and never have trusted my mother, I had taken a precaution. With Felicity's consent, I had preemptively arranged for the clinic to send a second, certified copy of the results directly to my address. It was a move born of pure paranoia, but my instincts were screaming at me to cover all my bases. Good thing I did. That afternoon, my sister called me, her voice tight with anxiety. They didn't come, Brenda. The results weren't in the mail. A cold certainty washed over me. Who got the mail from the P.O. box today, Felicity? I asked, already knowing the answer. Our mother did, she replied. That was all the confirmation I needed. My theory was correct. Doris was actively trying to sabotage her daughter's relationship to force Carlos out of the picture. The cruelty of it was staggering. She would rather see her own daughter be a single mother than be with a man she didn't approve of. I ended the call with Felicity and immediately dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. Hello, Brenda, dear. What a surprise. Hello, Mother, I said, my voice like ice. I heard Felicity's DNA test didn't come in the mail today. There was a slight pause. Oh. Yes. Such a shame. But I'm sure it will be here soon. The mail can be so slow. Her lie was clumsy, unconvincing. Did you take it? I asked, cutting straight to the point. I know it arrived today. I paid extra to have it sent as priority mail. What? She gasped, her voice filled with fake indignation. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? I would never. Okay then, I said calmly, setting my trap. I guess I'll just bring over the backup copy that was sent to me. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, her voice, much smaller now. Oh. You got a copy too? Yeah, I had one sent to my house as well, I said, letting her squirm. Felicity gave her okay and everything. So I guess I'll just call her then, and we'll meet up somewhere to open it. Wait, she yelped, the panic evident in her voice. That's no necess. Click. I hung up the phone before she could finish. The satisfaction was immense. I immediately called Felicity and told her to be ready. I picked her and Carlos up from my mother's house. I didn't even go to the door. I just honked, and they scurried out like fugitives making a prison break. I drove us to a local diner, a quiet place with comfortable booths. I handed the sealed, certified envelope to Carlos. We all sat there for a moment, the envelope lying on the table between us like a ticking bomb. Together, they opened it. I watched their eyes scan the page, and then I saw it. The tension in Carlos's shoulders dissolved. A huge, brilliant smile spread across his face, followed by tears of pure relief. He looked at Felicity, his eyes shining. It's mine, he whispered. She's mine. Felicity burst into happy, relieved sobs. And then, in the middle of that sticky-floored diner, Carlos slid out of the booth and got down on one knee. He pulled a small, simple ring from his pocket and asked her to marry him. She said yes, about a dozen times, laughing and crying all at once. It was a genuinely sweet, beautiful moment. And the little vindictive part of me couldn't wait to see my mother's face when she got the news. After the proposal, the three of us were floating. We ordered milkshakes and fries and just sat there, talking about the future, about baby names, about everything. For the first time, it felt like we were a family. But eventually, I had to take them back to my mother's house to get their things. The happy bubble was about to burst. When I pulled up to the curb, the scene was worse than I could have imagined. There were two strange men in the front yard, hauling boxes and bags of my sister's belongings out of the house and dumping them on the lawn. Clothes, baby supplies, personal items, all just piled up on the grass like trash. Then the front door flew open and our mother came storming out. She was in a rage, her face purple with fury. In her hand, she was waving the DNA test results, the very ones she claimed had never arrived. She marched right up to Felicity and began verbally tearing into her. How could you, she shrieked, her voice cracking. How could you make a baby with that racial slur? She spat the word out, a vile poison that filled the air. I thought you dating him was just a stupid phase. A little rebellion. But now you're going to have his baby." Her eyes were wild. "I would have been sort of okay with having his little bastard around if you weren't raising it in my home and she jabbed a finger at Carlos, wasn't around anymore." The hate coming off her was a physical force. Then she turned on me, her eyes burning with a special kind of venom reserved just for me. She snapped her fingers. Snap. Snap. "And you. I hope you're proud of yourself. I tried to make this family normal, to keep it clean, but you wouldn't do as I say like a good daughter should. And now all of my plans are ruined." She took a deep breath, her chest heaving. She looked from me to Felicity, her face a mask of utter contempt. "Well, she's your problem now, Brenda," she screamed, her voice echoing down the street. "I no longer have any children." She turned on her heel, marched back into the house, and slammed the door, leaving us standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of our lives. Felicity stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, finally seeing our mother for the monster she truly was. Carlos wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. That night, I took them home. Not to the damp basement, but to my home. I put them in the spare room while we figured out what to do next. She had disowned us. She had thrown her pregnant daughter out onto the street. The finality of it was terrifying, but it was also liberating. The tie was finally, irrevocably cut. She turned her back, leaving us standing among the ruined piles of our belongings, our lives just as scattered. In that moment, I knew everything was truly over. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you gave me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement that cheers me on. Please, comment with the number 1, and listen as I tell you how this all ended. That night was a blur. We gathered up what we could from the lawn, stuffing clothes and baby things into trash bags, while neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. The humiliation was immense, but we were in survival mode. Back at my house, Mark helped us get them settled into the guest room. He made tea, he found blankets, he was just good. Solid. Everything my family wasn't. Felicity was in shock. She just sat on the edge of the bed, staring into space, replaying our mother's hateful words over and over. But Carlos was there, holding her hand, reminding her that they were together, that they had me, that they would be okay. Seeing them together, seeing the genuine love and commitment between them, I knew I had made the right choice to intervene. The next morning, I made good on my promise. I took Carlos to the office with me. My dad had always said you can judge a person's character by their willingness to learn, and Carlos was an eager student. He started in an entry-level position, but he was a quick learner and a hard worker. I had no doubt he'd get a promotion and a higher salary soon enough. For the first time, he had a clear path forward, a way to provide for his new family. I also made another important call. My company's insurance plan had excellent mental health coverage. I found a therapist for Felicity and made her first appointment. At first, she was resistant, but after everything that had happened, she knew she needed help to unpack the years of emotional abuse and manipulation she had endured. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a slow, painful process. But week by week, I started to see a change in my sister. She stopped referring to our mother as Mommy. She started talking about her the way I did, with a sad clarity, recognizing the toxicity for what it was. She and I started having real conversations, not about houses or money, but about our childhoods, about the ways Doris had pitted us against each other. One evening, a few months later, she came to me, her eyes clear and steady. "You were right, Brenda," she said quietly. "About everything. I was a spoiled mooch. I let her control me, I let her turn me against you and Dad. Therapy is making me realize so many things. I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in my eyes. It was the apology I never thought I'd get. I'm going to be a good mother, she said, a new determination in her voice. I'm going to be a good partner to Carlos. I'm going to break the cycle. And she did. With the help of a friend of mine in real estate, we found them a small, clean apartment they could afford. It wasn't my dad's big house, but it was theirs. They built a home. A few months after that, my beautiful niece was born. Holding her for the first time, seeing the love in Felicity and Carlos's eyes, I knew everything had been worth it. As for my mother, Doris, we no longer have any contact. I got a restraining order against her shortly after she threw Felicity out. I urged my sister to do the same, to protect herself and her baby. That woman is not capable of love, only control, and my niece will never be exposed to that poison. Sometimes, you have to burn a bridge to find your way to a better shore. My family as I knew it is gone, but in its place, something new and better has grown. A family built not on obligation or manipulation, but on choice, respect, and a hard-won love. And that is an inheritance worth more than any house. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it. And please, leave a comment below, I read every single one. Take care of yourselves.